In the shadows of New York's criminal empire, one name ruled everything. Lucien DeLuca, a man feared by enemies, respected by allies, and hunted by ghosts from the past. But when the woman he loved died, the king of the underworld did something no one expected. He became silent. And in the world of organized crime, silence is far more dangerous than war. Welcome to the Mafia's obsession. Tonight we tell the story of a man who built an empire from blood and loyalty, and the war that began the moment his daughter was born. If you enjoy powerful Mafia stories like this, subscribe to the Mafia's obsession. Lucien DeLuca did not grieve loudly. Men expected rage after Elena Rossi died. They expected retaliation, violence, war. But Lucien gave them none of that. Instead, the city experienced something far more unsettling. Silence. 3 weeks passed after the funeral. No executions, no territorial expansion, no political intimidation. The DeLuca empire continued operating with surgical precision, as if nothing had changed. But inside DeLuca Tower, everything had changed. Lucien stood in the nursery overlooking Manhattan. The skyline burned with midnight light beyond reinforced glass. Inside the room, the only sound was the soft breathing of a sleeping child. Victoria DeLuca, his daughter. The last thing Elena had given him before she died. Lucien rested one hand on the crib rail. He watched the child with the same intensity he once reserved for battlefields. Matteo entered quietly behind him. "You haven't left the tower in 2 days." Lucien didn't turn. "Correct. That's unusual." "Yes." Matteo studied the security monitors. "You doubled the guard rotation." "Yes." "Why?" Lucien finally looked up. Because Lucien understood something the rest of the underworld had not realized yet. Elena's death had not weakened him. It had simplified him. He now had exactly one priority, and that priority slept in the crib beside him. Lucien's voice was disturbingly calm. The world just became smaller. Matteo frowned slightly. "How?" Lucien looked down at his daughter. "There are now only 2 types of people left in it." "Which are?" Lucien answered without hesitation. "Those who protect her, and those who disappear." The underworld did not trust calm. Calm meant something was coming. Romano watched the DeLuca silence from his estate in Naples. Volkov observed it from across the Black Sea. Even smaller families felt the shift. Lucien DeLuca was not expanding. He was not retaliating. He was waiting. And that was unfamiliar. Inside DeLuca Tower, Matteo reviewed the latest intelligence report. "Romano stopped moving shipments through our routes." Lucien sat at his desk reviewing financial projections. "That was expected." Matteo frowned. "Expected?" "Yes." "And Volkov?" Lucien flipped another page. "Still quiet. That worries me more." Lucien looked up slowly. Volkov had withdrawn completely from global communication channels. No meetings, no financial movement, no political pressure. A ghost. But ghosts were dangerous because they waited until the moment mattered most. "Volkov does not rush," Lucien said. "No, he studies." Matteo nodded. "And right now he's studying you." Lucien stood slowly. "Yes." Matteo leaned back slightly. "And what is he seeing?" Lucien walked toward the window overlooking the city. A father. A man who had lost the woman he loved. A king who had chosen empire over presence the night Elena died. Many enemies would interpret that as weakness. Lucien's reflection stared back from the glass. "He's seeing grief," Matteo said carefully. "And is he wrong?" Lucien's voice dropped colder. "Yes." Matteo waited. Lucien finished the sentence. "He's seeing restraint." and restraint was something far more dangerous than rage. Matteo noticed the pattern first. 3 small financial institutions in Zurich quietly withdrew from DeLuca investment corridors. Nothing dramatic, just careful distancing. Then 2 shipping insurance contracts disappeared overnight. Again, no announcement, just absence. Matteo placed the reports on Lucien's desk. "This is coordinated." Lucien scanned the documents. "Yes." "Volkov." Lucien shook his head. "No." Matteo frowned. "Then who?" Lucien tapped the screen and pulled up a map of global financial routes. Several lines blinked red. Small disruptions, minor changes. But when connected together, they formed pressure. Lucien leaned back slightly. "This is not an attack." Matteo crossed his arms. "What is it?" Lucien answered calmly. "Preparation." Matteo stared at the map. "For war?" Lucien shook his head. "No. For replacement." Silence filled the office. Matteo spoke slowly. "You think someone is preparing to replace the DeLuca empire?" "Yes." "And they're doing it quietly?" "Yes." Matteo exhaled. "Who would be powerful enough to attempt that?" Lucien's gaze remained fixed on the map. "That is the question." Then the screen changed. A surveillance image appeared. Matteo leaned closer. "What is that?" Lucien opened the photo. A man sitting at a private table in Monaco. Silver hair, sharp eyes. Matteo froze. "That's impossible." Lucien's voice remained calm. "No." Matteo stared at the screen. "That man died 10 years ago." Lucien said the name quietly. Adrian Morelli. Adrian Morelli had been one of the last men Adriano DeLuca ever trusted, which meant one of 2 things. Either the reports of his death were wrong, or someone had brought him back. Matteo stared at the photograph again. "This was taken yesterday." Lucien nodded. "Yes." Matteo frowned. "That's impossible." Lucien stood slowly. "Impossible things are usually deliberate." Matteo leaned forward. "So he wants to be seen?" "Yes." "Why?" Lucien's voice remained calm. "To start a conversation." Matteo crossed his arms. "With who?" Lucien answered quietly. "With me." The meeting invitation arrived 2 hours later. No encryption, no hidden routing. Just a simple message delivered through one of DeLuca's oldest financial channels. Monaco, private marina. Midnight. Matteo read the message twice. "This is a trap." Lucien nodded. "Yes." Matteo looked up. "And you're going anyway?" "Yes." Matteo sighed. "You don't even hesitate." Lucien walked toward the elevator. "Hesitation invites mistakes." Matteo followed him. "And walking into traps doesn't?" Lucien stepped inside the elevator. "That depends." "On what?" Lucien's eyes hardened slightly. "On who built the trap." The marina was quiet. Too quiet. Luxury yachts floated silently in the dark water. Security teams watched from a distance, but Lucien walked forward alone. Morelli waited beside a black sailboat. Older, but the same sharp posture, the same calculating eyes. Morelli smiled faintly. "You grew taller than your father." Lucien stopped several feet away. "You grew harder to kill than expected." Morelli chuckled softly. "Death is often exaggerated." Lucien's voice remained calm. "Why are you here?" Morelli looked out over the ocean. "Because the world is changing." Lucien waited. Morelli turned back toward him. "And I wanted to see what kind of man inherited Adriano's empire." Lucien answered quietly. "The kind who finishes unfinished wars." Morelli's smile widened slightly. "Yes. That's exactly why I came back." Back in New York, Matteo watched the marina surveillance feed. He hated this. Lucien standing alone with a ghost from the past. 2 old predators studying each other. He turned toward Isabella Romano. You knew Morelli was alive. Isabella didn't deny it. Yes. Matteo frowned. And you didn't think that information was important? Isabella remained calm. Lucien already suspected. Matteo scoffed. Suspecting and confirming are two different things. Isabella watched the screen carefully. Morelli isn't the problem. Matteo crossed his arms. Then what is? Isabella answered quietly. Why he came back. At the marina, Morelli poured 2 glasses of wine. Lucien didn't take one. Morelli shrugged. Still cautious. Lucien remained still. Still alive? Morelli laughed softly. Fair point. Then his expression changed. You know why I returned? Lucien shook his head. No. Morelli leaned against the railing. Because your empire is about to face something it has never faced before. Lucien's voice stayed calm. And what would that be? Morelli answered quietly. A dynasty. Lucien's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. Morelli finished the sentence slowly. Viktor Volkov is no longer hiding. The name hung in the air like a shadow. Lucien did not react immediately. But inside his mind, several pieces moved. Volkov, a ghost older than Morelli, a strategist who had disappeared after Adriano's death. Matteo's voice crackled through the earpiece. Lucien, he's telling the truth. Lucien spoke calmly. I know. Morelli watched him carefully. You don't seem surprised, Lucien answered quietly. I never believed he was dead. Morelli nodded slowly. Good. Lucien asked the next question. Where is he? Morelli smiled again. That's the interesting part. Lucien waited. Morelli finished the sentence. He's already here. Back in the tower, Isabella froze. Matteo looked at her. What? Isabella whispered quietly. If Volkov is already moving. Matteo frowned. Then this meeting was never about Lucien. Isabella nodded slowly. Yes. Matteo leaned forward. Then what was it about? Isabella's eyes moved towards the nursery security feed, where Vittoria slept peacefully. And suddenly, she understood something terrifying. This war, she said softly, was never about Lucien. Matteo followed her gaze. The nursery, the child, and the realization hit him like a bullet. Oh no! The marina wind grew colder. Lucien stepped closer to Morelli. You didn't come back to warn me. Morelli smiled. No. Lucien's voice dropped. You came back to watch. Morelli nodded. Yes, Lucien asked quietly. Watch what? Morelli leaned closer. History repeating itself. Lucien's eyes hardened. My father died because he underestimated Volkov. Morelli nodded. Yes. Lucien finished the sentence. I won't. Morelli studied him for several seconds. Then he said something that made even Lucien pause. You already did. Lucien did not return to New York immediately. Instead, he remained at the marina for several minutes after Morelli left. The sea was quiet. The moon reflected across the water like polished steel. Matteo's voice came through the earpiece. Lucien, you need to come back. Lucien remained still. I know. Matteo hesitated. There's something you need to see. Lucien turned slowly toward the helicopter waiting on the pier. Send it. Inside DeLuca Tower, the nursery lights were dim. Vittoria slept peacefully. But the security feed on Matteo's tablet told a different story. Matteo zoomed the image. A black car parked 3 blocks away. Engine running. 2 men inside. Neither of them had moved for over an hour. Isabella leaned closer. They're watching the tower. Matteo nodded. Yes. Isabella studied the screen carefully. They're not amateurs. Matteo frowned. How can you tell? Isabella answered quietly. Because they're not trying to hide. Lucien arrived 30 minutes later. The tower had already entered silent lockdown. Security teams filled every corridor. Lucien stepped into the control room. Matteo handed him the tablet immediately. Lucien studied the car, the men inside, the stillness. They want us to notice them. Matteo nodded. Yes. Lucien handed the tablet back. Don't move! Matteo frowned. What? Lucien walked toward the elevator. Do not approach them. Matteo followed. Why? Lucien's voice dropped colder. Because they're not here to attack. Outside the tower, the black car finally moved. Slowly, carefully. It stopped directly in front of the building entrance. 2 men stepped out. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't run. They simply stood there, waiting. Lucien stepped outside. Matteo and 4 guards followed behind him. The first man spoke calmly. We bring a message. Lucien said nothing. The man continued. From Victor Volkov. The name echoed through the night air. Lucien's expression did not change. Speak. The man reached into his jacket. The guards raised their weapons instantly, but the man only pulled out an envelope. He placed it on the hood of the car, then stepped back. Lucien opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. Matteo leaned closer, then froze. The photo showed Lucien, standing beside Elena, holding newborn Vittoria in the hospital. A moment that had never been public. A moment no one outside the inner circle should have known about. Lucien's voice dropped into something dangerous. Where did he get this? The messenger answered calmly. Volkov sees everything. Lucien looked at the man. What is the message? The man spoke slowly. Victor Volkov wishes to congratulate you. Lucien waited. The man finished the sentence. On the birth of your daughter. The messengers left without another word. Their car disappeared into the Manhattan traffic. Lucien stood in the street holding the photograph. Matteo spoke first. That means Volkov has been watching you for years. Lucien nodded. Yes. Isabella's voice came quietly from behind them. No. Lucien turned toward her. What do you mean? Isabella's expression was calm. He hasn't been watching Lucien. Matteo frowned. Then who? Isabella looked toward the tower, toward the nursery, and said something that made the air feel colder. He's been watching Vittoria. That night, Lucien stood beside the crib again, the same place where the season had begun. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass. But the world outside had changed, because now Lucien understood something clearly. Volkov had known about Vittoria since the day she was born, which meant the war had begun long before anyone realized it. Lucien rested his hand gently on the crib rail. Vittoria's small fingers wrapped around one of his. Matteo stood quietly in the doorway. So, this is really happening? Lucien nodded once. Yes. Matteo crossed his arms. You're about to fight a war your father couldn't win. Lucien looked down at his daughter, then answered quietly. My father fought for power. Matteo waited. Lucien finished the sentence. I'm fighting for her. The message from Volkov changed everything. The underworld moved quickly once his name resurfaced. Families that had stayed neutral for years began choosing sides. Some quietly aligned with DeLuca. Others vanished from communication entirely. Lucien watched the changes without reacting, because fear did not interest him. Patterns did. Matteo entered the war room carrying 3 new intelligence reports. Berlin, Singapore, Istanbul. Lucien looked up slowly. Matteo placed the files on the table. All DeLuca financial corridors. Lucien scanned the reports. 3 separate attacks, 3 different continents, 3 different methods. But the timing was identical. Lucien leaned back slightly. Volkov is testing the system. Matteo frowned. Testing? Lucien tapped the map. Yes. Matteo studied the blinking red markers. Testing what? Lucien answered calmly. Our reaction speed. Across the Black Sea, Viktor Volkov watched the same map. His fortress command room remained silent. Morelli stood beside him. 3 successful disruptions. Volkov nodded. Yes. Morelli leaned closer. And DeLuca hasn't retaliated. Volkov smiled faintly. That means he's thinking. Morelli crossed his arms. You admire him. Volkov's eyes remained on the screen. I admire intelligence, Morelli asked carefully. And Lucien has that? Volkov answered quietly. He has something more dangerous. Morelli raised an eyebrow. What? Volkov finished the sentence. Purpose. Back in New York, Isabella Romano studied the same intelligence reports, but she wasn't looking at the attacks. She was studying the timeline. 3 attacks, 12 hours apart, each one slightly more aggressive. Matteo noticed her expression. What? Isabella pointed to the map. He's escalating. Matteo nodded. Yes. Isabella shook her head. No. Matteo frowned. What do you mean? Isabella spoke carefully. This isn't escalation. Matteo waited. It's choreography. Lucien understood immediately. Volkov wasn't destroying the empire. He was moving it. Every disruption forced DeLuca assets to shift positions, shipping routes rerouted, financial corridors adjusted, security teams redeployed. Lucien watched the map slowly rearrange itself. Then he nodded once. He's mapping us. Matteo froze. What? Lucien tapped the screen. Every reaction reveals another layer of the system. Matteo exhaled slowly. So he's learning the entire empire. Lucien answered quietly. Yes.
If we hit the pipelines
Matteo
here,
leaned
we control
forward.
the eastern distribution.
That means he's planning something
but
bigger.
secure the shipping lanes first.
Lucien looked at
I
the
want
map
eyes
again,
on everything.
then said something that made Matteo pause. He already has. 3 days later, the first body appeared. A DeLuca financial broker. Dead inside a Zurich hotel room. No struggle. No forced entry. Just a single bullet wound. Matteo studied the report. Execution style. Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo frowned. This broker wasn't important. Lucien leaned back. That's the point. Matteo looked confused. What? Lucien finished the sentence. Volkov is sending a message. The message arrived that same night. Another envelope. Delivered through the same silent method. No signature, no return channel. Inside was a single photograph. Lucien opened it slowly. Matteo leaned closer. The image showed something unsettling. A security camera still frame, taken inside DeLuca Tower. Specifically, the nursery hallway. Matteo felt his stomach tighten. How? Lucien remained perfectly still, because the photo had been taken 2 nights earlier, which meant something impossible. Volkov had eyes inside the tower. The investigation began immediately. Every security officer was interrogated. Every surveillance system was rechecked. Every staff member reviewed. Nothing. No breach. No compromised systems. No internal leak. Matteo slammed the tablet onto the table. This is impossible. Lucien remained calm. No. Matteo ran his hand through his hair. Then explain it. Lucien looked at the photograph again. The nursery hallway, the guard positions, the exact camera angle. Lucien spoke quietly. He didn't place someone inside the tower. Matteo frowned. Then how did he get this? Lucien finished the sentence slowly. He placed someone inside the system. Isabella studied the digital file, then nodded. Lucien is right. Matteo looked at her. You found something? Isabella zoomed the image. Metadata. Matteo leaned closer. What about it? Isabella answered quietly. The photo wasn't taken inside the tower. Matteo blinked. What? Isabella finished the sentence. It was taken from a satellite. Silence filled the room. Matteo stared at the screen. A satellite? Isabella nodded. Yes. Matteo scoffed. That's military-level technology. Lucien said nothing, because there were only a few organizations in the world capable of that. Governments, intelligence agencies, and men who had spent decades building hidden empires. Lucien folded the photograph carefully, then said something quietly. Volkov isn't fighting a war. Matteo frowned. What is he doing? Lucien finished the sentence. He's rewriting the battlefield. That night, Lucien returned to the nursery again. The same quiet room, the same city lights. Vittoria stirred slightly in her sleep. Lucien lifted her carefully. For a moment, the war disappeared. The empire disappeared. Everything disappeared, except the small hand gripping his finger. Matteo stood in the doorway. You're thinking? Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo asked quietly. About Volkov? Lucien shook his head slightly. No. Matteo frowned. Then what? Lucien answered calmly. About the future. Matteo crossed his arms. And what does the future look like? Lucien looked down at his daughter, then spoke quietly. It looks like a war that cannot be avoided. The first attempt on Lucien's life came without warning. It happened on a quiet afternoon. DeLuca Tower operated normally. Executives moved through the lobby. Financial analysts filled the upper floors. Nothing looked unusual, which was exactly why it worked. Lucien stepped out of the elevator onto the main office floor. Matteo followed 2 steps behind him. Then the window exploded. Glass shattered across the room. The sound of the sniper rifle echoed from another building. Matteo grabbed Lucien instantly. Both men dropped behind the marble desk. Security alarms erupted. Lucien remained calm. Matteo spoke through the radio. Sniper on the south tower. Lucien slowly looked toward the shattered window. 1 bullet. Perfect trajectory. Perfect timing. Volkov's message was clear. He could reach Lucien anywhere. Across the city, the sniper dismantled his rifle calmly. The job had never been to kill Lucien, only to remind him of something. The sniper transmitted 1 short message. Shot delivered. Miles away, Victor Volkov read the report. Morelli stood beside him. You missed. Volkov shook his head slowly. No. Morelli frowned. What do you mean? Volkov leaned back slightly. That bullet was not meant for his heart. Morelli waited. Volkov finished the sentence quietly. It was meant for his attention. Back in the tower, Lucien stood beside the shattered glass. Matteo approached carefully. That shot was perfect. Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo crossed his arms. He could have killed you. Lucien remained silent for a moment, then answered calmly. He chose not to. Matteo frowned. Why? Lucien looked toward the skyline. Because Volkov does not want me dead. Matteo blinked. What? Lucien finished the sentence. He wants me angry. That night, the investigation produced another surprise. The sniper had disappeared without leaving a trace. No weapon, no fingerprints, no vehicle, nothing. Matteo slammed the report onto the table. This is impossible. Lucien remained calm. No. Matteo looked at him. You keep saying that. Lucien leaned forward slightly. Because impossibility is usually preparation. Matteo sighed. For what? Lucien answered quietly. For the next move. 3 days later, the next move arrived. A convoy transporting DeLuca financial records vanished in Prague. No wreckage, no bodies, no signal, just absence. Matteo stared at the satellite images. They disappeared. Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo looked at him. Volkov? Lucien shook his head slightly. No. Matteo frowned. Then who? Lucien answered calmly. Someone helping him. The possibility of a traitor spread quickly through the empire. Security teams interrogated dozens of employees. Financial analysts reviewed every transaction. Nothing appeared unusual, which only made it worse. Matteo leaned against the table. If someone is helping Volkov, they're very close to us. Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo frowned. How close? Lucien finished the sentence quietly. Close enough to understand the system. Isabella Romano watched the investigation carefully. She had seen wars like this before. Wars where the enemy was not outside the walls, but inside them. She approached Lucien later that evening. You're looking for the wrong person. Lucien looked at her. Explain. Isabella crossed the room slowly. You think the traitor works for you? Lucien nodded. Yes. Isabella shook her head. No. Matteo frowned. Then where? Isabella answered quietly. The betrayal didn't start with Lucien. Both men looked at her. Isabella finished the sentence. It started with his father. The room fell silent. Matteo blinked. What? Lucien remained perfectly still. Isabella spoke carefully. Adriano DeLuca trusted only a few men with his final negotiation. Lucien listened. Only 3. Matteo crossed his arms. And one of them betrayed him. Isabella nodded slowly. Yes. Lucien finally asked the question. Who? Isabella hesitated. Then she answered quietly. The man who opened the door that night. Lucien felt something cold settle inside him. For years he believed Adriano died in a failed negotiation. Now Isabella was suggesting something else. Betrayal. From someone Adriano trusted. Matteo spoke carefully. You know who it is. Isabella nodded. Yes. Lucien's voice dropped slightly. Name. Isabella looked directly at him. If I tell you, Lucien waited. Your entire empire will change. Lucien did not hesitate. Tell me. Isabella exhaled slowly. The man who betrayed your father, she paused, is still alive. The revelation did not explode the room. Lucien DeLuca did not shout. He did not question Isabella again. Instead, he walked slowly toward the window. The skyline of Manhattan glowed beneath the night sky. Matteo studied him carefully. You're not surprised, Lucien answered quietly. I suspected. Matteo frowned. Suspected what? Lucien turned slightly. That my father did not lose because of weakness. Matteo crossed his arms. You think Adriano was betrayed? Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo asked the obvious question. Then why didn't you investigate this years ago? Lucien's voice remained calm. Because belief is powerful. Matteo frowned. What do you mean? Lucien finished the sentence slowly. So I believed mercy killed him. That belief had shaped Lucien's entire life. It had built the empire. It had hardened his methods. It had turned him into a man the underworld feared. But if that belief was wrong, then something far more dangerous had been hiding in the past. Matteo leaned forward. So who betrayed Adriano? Lucien looked toward Isabella. Finish the story. Isabella nodded slowly. There were 3 men in that room the night Adriano died. Lucien listened. Your father? The Volkov envoy. And a third man. Matteo frowned. And that third man opened the door. Isabella nodded. Yes, Lucien asked quietly. Who? Isabella answered. Enrico Dallari. Matteo blinked. That name is familiar. Lucien remained silent, because he knew the name very well. Enrico Dallari had been one of Adriano's most trusted strategists. He had died years later, officially from illness. Matteo leaned back slowly. You're telling me Adriano's closest advisor betrayed him? Isabella nodded. Yes. Matteo frowned. But Dallari is dead. Lucien spoke calmly. No. Matteo turned toward him. What? Lucien finished the sentence quietly. His son isn't. Silence filled the war room. Matteo stared at Lucien. You think the son continued the betrayal? Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo frowned. And who is the son? Lucien answered calmly. The man who runs Volkov's political network in Europe. Matteo's eyes widened slightly. Carlo Ventresca. Lucien nodded. Yes. The name changed everything. Carlo Ventresca had appeared suddenly 5 years earlier. An intelligent strategist. A financial genius. A man who had helped stabilize several European crime families, including some DeLuca allies. Matteo exhaled slowly. That means Volkov planted him inside the system years ago. Lucien nodded. Yes. Matteo crossed his arms. So the war didn't start when Victoria was born. Lucien looked toward the dark skyline. No. Matteo finished the sentence. It started when Adriano died. That night, Lucien left the tower again. But this time he did not travel to Monaco, or Zurich, or any of the cities controlled by the DeLuca Empire. Instead, he flew east. Far east. The helicopter crossed frozen mountain ranges before landing. Lucien stepped out into the cold wind. The Carpathian Mountains. Matteo looked around the snowy valley. You're sure this is the place? Lucien nodded once. No, yes. Matteo frowned. There's nothing here. Lucien looked toward the dark cliffs. Look again. Then the fortress lights came on. Massive steel gates slowly opened in the mountain wall. Searchlights illuminated the valley. Matteo whispered under his breath. Well, Lucien walked forward calmly, because he already knew who was waiting inside. The fortress doors opened. A tall man stood in the entrance hall. Older, silver hair, sharp eyes. The presence of someone who had ruled from the shadows for decades. Viktor Volkov. Lucien stopped several meters away. Neither man rushed. Volkov studied him carefully. You look like your father. Lucien's voice remained calm. You killed my father. Volkov did not deny it. Yes. Silence stretched across the stone hall. Matteo stood behind Lucien, watching carefully. Lucien asked the question that had shaped his entire life. Why? Volkov answered without hesitation. Because he refused the future. Lucien's eyes hardened. And you think I won't? Volkov smiled faintly. No. Lucien waited. Volkov finished the sentence slowly. I know you won't. Lucien DeLuca did not attack Viktor Volkov inside the fortress. Not yet. Two men like them did not rush decisions. The stone hall remained silent. Cold air moved through the enormous chamber. Volkov studied Lucien carefully. You came alone. Lucien nodded. Yes. Volkov smiled slightly. Just like your father. Lucien's voice remained calm. I'm not my father. Volkov stepped closer. No. Lucien waited. Volkov finished the sentence. You are something far more dangerous. Matteo remained behind Lucien, watching every movement, every shadow, every possible sniper position. But nothing happened. No guards appeared. No alarms sounded. The fortress remained quiet. Matteo frowned. "This is too easy," Lucien answered quietly. "Yes." Volkov tilted his head slightly. "You expected a battle." Lucien said nothing. Volkov continued. "But this war was never meant to be decided tonight," Lucien asked calmly. "Then when?" Volkov answered slowly. "When the next generation is ready." Back in New York, Isabella Romano watched the security feeds inside DeLuca Tower. Something felt wrong. The tower was quiet. Too quiet. Then the alarm triggered. Red lights flooded the security panels. Isabella stood instantly. "Matteo!" But Matteo wasn't in the tower. He was in the mountains with Lucien. Isabella's voice turned sharp. "Secure the nursery immediately." Across the ocean, Lucien felt his phone vibrate. One message, from Isabella. 2 words, "Tower breach." Lucien's expression hardened instantly. Volkov noticed. "It has begun." Lucien's voice dropped colder. "You sent them." Volkov did not deny it. "Yes." Lucien stepped closer. "My daughter's not part of this war." Volkov answered calmly. "Your daughter is the reason for it." Inside DeLuca Tower, gunfire erupted. 2 operatives moved through the upper floors with surgical precision. Professional. Fast. Silent. But the DeLuca security teams were not amateurs. The first attacker fell in the hallway. The second pushed forward anyway. Because their objective was not the building. It was the nursery. Lucien turned away from Volkov. Matteo already understood. "See, we're leaving." Volkov's voice echoed through the hall. "You cannot reach her in time." Lucien stopped walking, for a brief moment. Then he answered quietly. "You don't understand something." Volkov waited. Lucien finished the sentence. "I never leave my empire unguarded." Back in New York, the nursery door remained sealed. 4 guards stood in position. The final attacker rushed the corridor. Bullets shattered the walls. 1 guard fell. Another fired. The attacker collapsed just inches from the nursery door. Inside the room, Vittoria cried. The war had reached her doorstep. Lucien arrived in New York hours later. The tower stood intact, but the hallway outside the nursery looked like a battlefield. Matteo leaned against the wall. "You're late." Lucien looked at the bodies. "You handled it." Matteo nodded. "Yes." Lucien stepped inside the nursery. Vittoria had stopped crying. He lifted her carefully. The small hand wrapped around his finger. Lucien's voice dropped quietly. "This ends now." The counterattack began that same night. Lucien shut down every DeLuca operation worldwide. Shipping routes froze. Financial corridors disappeared. Political allies vanished from communication. Matteo stared at the screens. "You just shut down half the criminal economy." Lucien nodded. "Yes." Matteo frowned. "That's insane." Lucien answered calmly. "No." Matteo waited. Lucien finished the sentence. "It's preparation." Across the Carpathian Mountains, Volkov watched the sudden silence. Morelli entered the command room. DeLuca shut down his empire. Volkov nodded. "Yes." Morelli frowned. "That means he's coming." Volkov smiled slightly. "Yes." Lucien arrived at the fortress before sunrise. Snow covered the mountains. The helicopter lifted away, leaving him alone. He walked toward the gates calmly. Inside the fortress, Volkov waited. Morelli stood beside him. The doors opened. Lucien entered. 3 men, 3 bloodlines, 3 futures. Volkov spoke first. "You came." Lucien nodded. "Yes." Morelli smirked slightly. "History repeats itself." Lucien's eyes hardened. "No." Morelli frowned. Why not? Lucien finished the sentence quietly. Because I finish wars. The gunshot echoed through the fortress. Morelli fell first. Lucien moved faster than anyone expected. Volkov did not react. He simply watched. Lucien raised the weapon again. My father refused you. Volkov nodded slowly. Yes, Lucien's voice became ice. And I finish what he started. Volkov looked directly at him. You are worthy of the Empire. Lucien pulled the trigger. The war ended. Days later, the underworld changed forever. Romano withdrew from the conflict. Volkov's network collapsed. The fortress in the mountains was abandoned, and Lucien DeLuca returned to New York. The nursery remained the same. Soft light, quiet breathing. Vittoria slept peacefully. Matteo stood in the doorway. So, it's over. Lucien looked down at his daughter. No. Matteo frowned. What do you mean? Lucien answered quietly. It's just beginning. The city outside continued moving, unaware of the war that had reshaped the underworld. But inside DeLuca Tower, a new reality had formed. Lucien no longer ruled for power. He ruled for legacy. And one day, Vittoria DeLuca would inherit a world that already feared her name.